let's get started. So thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Allie Tellier. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Canine Behavior Studies. And for those that aren't familiar with CCBS, it's an organization dedicated to improving the lives of dogs and those who love them through our studies and education. CCBS is a nonprofit organization, which means we rely on the generosity of people like you to support our research. So thank you once again for attending today. It does help our organization. We're so happy to see you. If you were one of the people who purchased the Tier 1 ticket, and that includes the book, it'll be mailed to you tomorrow. So for the next hour, our team is going to be answering your questions on puppy training. Like I said at the beginning, for those that might have missed it, we're going to answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to all the questions that were already submitted, we're going to follow up with you in an email. And if there is time at the end and we have a few minutes, then we'd like to hear from you if you have any other questions. So you can use the chat feature until then, and you're welcome to keep your camera on, or you can turn it off, whatever's comfortable for you. So there's 3 members of our CCBS team joining us today. The first is the president of CCBS and world-renowned veterinary behaviorist, Dr. Nicholas Dodman. You'll see him with the background of his Pets on the Couch book behind him, which looks like he's sitting on the couch with the pets. Next are our CCBS research associates and professional dog trainers. Donna, can you give us a hello? There she is. So Donna is the owner and operator of TLC Dog Trainer, located in Fairfield County, Connecticut. And Vivian, could you give us a hello?
Hello.
Yes. Vivian is an applied anthrozoologist and owner-operator of Boston Canine Concierge. And it would take more than the hour we have together to list all the accomplishments and certifications that these 3 team members have. They are all listed on our website, so I hope you get a chance to go and see all that they've done because it's remarkable. So without further ado, I'd like to admit a couple more people into our event. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Nicholas Dodman, who will begin with a little bit of history about puppy training and how our research has helped.
Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Ellie. I've been a veterinarian for a long time, since 1970, so that's 51 years. And to begin with, I did a fair bit of general practice, vaccinating, talking to people about puppy training and so on. And I had a period of time where I was sort of in the back room doing anesthesiology before emerging into animal behavior in 1990. Immediately, I was faced with this, what I thought was a dilemma, and that is veterinarians like myself were recommending that puppies didn't go to puppy training until all vaccinations were complete, which is normally 16 weeks. And without going any further, you could argue that was overly cautious, a very tough recommendation, and perhaps one that's not entirely necessary, because puppies are protected by the maternal antibodies that they get from nursing from mum through the colostrum. And of course, it depends a little bit on whether the mother has been vaccinated or encountered certain infections over the course of her life, about whether she has antibodies that she can pass on. But generally they do, and they pass them on to the puppies in the milk. And they can last, some of them, last, better staying power than others, like rabies. It's got a good half-life. But generally speaking, they can last for up to 16 weeks, while the levels are slowly decreasing. So the puppy's kind of protected. The same happens in other species, like calves, for example. If a calf doesn't suck mother's colostrum, they're prone to all kinds of infections and diarrhea and sometimes succumb. So the puppy's protected in the same way as a calf. So it seemed, first of all, not absolutely necessary, but what was the big deal? Well, the big deal was, and we're going to go into this in more detail later on, is that there are what were originally called critical periods of learning, now referred to as sensitive periods. The term critical period came from other species, like geese and such like, who have a very narrow window of really super acute learning, imprinting. With dogs, it's a bit more gradual, so the better term is the sensitive period of learning. And that was really first described by John Paul Scott in the 50s. I don't remember the exact year, but 56 or so. And then again in his book, probably the most scientific book on dogs, behavior and genetics, so-called The Genetics and Social Behavior of the Dog, where it's kind of complicated reading. It's in print, but it's a tough read, but you can get, it's more like a reference book. But in that, you'll find that he describes the sensitive period as somewhere in the 2 to 3 week age group, typically after the eyes and ear canals have opened, which is sort of at the end of the transitional period. So at the end of the 2nd week, that's all complete. So from the 3rd week onwards, you're in this sensitive period of learning. You'd think that would be a good time to start training. And a good friend of mine, Ian Dunbar, said training should start in the womb. You know, I know some people believe that with human babies, they start playing them music and doing nice things before they're even born. It's probably just Ian being Ian. But, you know, certainly early on would be better, and not waiting till 16 weeks. It seemed that you may have lost an opportunity. So in that book that we're giving away, The Puppy's First Steps, I think it was the first time when I said what I just said, that is, vaccination is important, but maternal antibodies will protect a pup. And if you want to catch the sensitive period, you need to start early. Whether it was because of what I wrote in the book or whether they came up with it independently, the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists pretty soon, within a year, adopted that and said, don't wait until 16 weeks, start as early as you can. Obviously taking sensible precautions. You wouldn't take a puppy down to a well-used puppy park, you know, full of germs, worms, giardia, and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, in a clean social area with other puppies who are not suffering from disease, why not? It seems like the right thing to do. And pretty shortly after that, the American Veterinary Medical Association jumped on board too, was making the same recommendation. And so one of our studies, we looked at exactly that. Basically, do you have a better effect and a positive effect from training in the first 3 to 4 months of age? Or is the 4, 5, 6 month age better, worse, the same? What is it? Well, we did produce an article and we published in a journal called Animals fairly recently. I think that link is up on our website. But I'd like to turn it over to Vivian to explain some of the findings that we made.
Thank you, Dr. Dodman, and thanks everybody for joining us today. We're really excited to have you. So the 3rd study that we published in Animals, which is free to you if you wanted to download it, it's open access. It's entitled An Investigation into the Impact of Pre-Adolescent Training on Canine Behavior, which is quite a mouthful. We published it in 2021. It took us, I want to say, a year and a half maybe to publish that, from design, maybe a year and a half, a little bit longer than that, designing it, looking at the data, extrapolating information, and then obviously the publishers, Animals looking and reviewing it, and then going back and forth, answering their questions. It's quite a process. And it's actually really good to be questioned, and that's what science is all about. And so our hypothesis, or our question, and I come from the training world. I do have a master's of science in anthozoology, which is the study of human and animal relations. But I came from the training world, and am constantly using reward-based training in my practice and behavior modification training. And so my interest in, as a team member, and the questions that we posed as a team was, was there an advantage to training these young dogs operant skills? I mean, certainly we weren't looking at the, as Dr. Dodman terms it, acclimating the dog. We were looking strictly at the manners training. And we found the biggest thing that we found was there was no difference, whether it was early on, before 4 months versus 5-6 months. Certainly it has to be done before the 6-month period of time. And we also were looking at, the other question was to confirm, and this is another part of why we study, why we perform scientific studies, is to look at other findings and to see if we can replicate the findings or not. And so we did find and confirm that we were looking at, optimal training methods and techniques. And so our findings of the 1,023 dogs, we had about 600, we had exactly 641 dog guardians or owners that answered our questions. And we had 1,023 dogs that we analyzed. We found that when a dog trains before 6 months of age, we see a decrease in aggression, compulsive behaviors, destructive behaviors, and excessive barking. We did also find that punishment-based methods did increase the odds of aggression and fear in dogs, which is really important. So punishment-based methods and techniques. So if we were looking at equipment as well. So those were the study results and our findings. And I'll pass it back on to, I guess, our moderator.
Yeah, thanks, Viv.
Welcome.
One of the things that makes me really excited to be with CCBS is just that, what Vivian mentioned. Our research directly impacts dogs. And I come from the shelter world, 15 years of leading a shelter here in Massachusetts. And time after time, we see animals surrendered for behaviors that, if only there had been intervention, if only they had support, if only they had used, a positive, better method, then this behavior could have been, managed, it could have been avoided, and the dog didn't need to be surrendered to the shelter. And if any of you are familiar with shelters as I am, it's those with the behavior issues who stay the longest, who might not make it out because their behavior is so far beyond what an average dog owner could handle. So it really makes me, I just got goosebumps. It really makes me excited to be with CCBS and be in a proactive way now and really help the animal welfare community in a broader scope. So again, I go back to thanking everyone that's attending, because it's your support that allows us to continue the research. So thank you. Let's get to the questions. Our first question is from Georgette, and it's, maybe Vivian, you could start off, and Dr. Dodman and Donna, you can jump in too. But Georgette asks, is there specific scientific research study that has tested the cognitive ability of puppies at certain ages of development from a breeder that uses an enhanced method of raising them, contrasted with a backyard breeder?
Can I start with that, Viv?
Absolutely, don't go for it.
Yeah, I'm going to start with that, and then I think I'm going to pass it off to the rest of the team because they can bring in the research piece. But I thought when I first heard that question, I thought about it a lot. And the more I thought about it, I really wanted to handle it for a couple of different reasons. And one of the things, how it was worded was, I'm just going to reread it again, that the way it makes it sound, to me at least, is that breeders are the ones who bring in this cognitive ability, and backyard breeders don't. But you can't assume that all breeders are going to do the enhanced methods of raising, and backyard breeders won't use those same messages, because there's a whole bunch of good, bad, and ugly on both sides. So that's the first thing that I wanted to kind of point out. However, what I did want to say is that no matter where the puppy comes from, backyard breeder, born in a shelter, a regular breeder, I believe that all puppies need several things for cognitive success. And that's how I really want to embrace this question. I think that all new puppies need a warm, safe, and stress-free environment. I believe that their nutritional needs need to be met. There needs to be opportunities for them to meet new people who can handle them gently and massage them. They need to be exposed to new sights and sounds. And they also need to be exposed to different substrates. This is my belief. So Vivian's going to bring in the research, but this is my belief. Fun fact, Guiding Eyes for the Blind, they actually do incorporate this early learning style where they really monopolize on those early sensitive stages. Their puppies at 1 week of age, they have volunteers come in who actually massage them every single day. So they're getting the handling and the touch and all of that. And at 3 weeks of age, each litter receives 3 one-hour socialization sessions per week. And that could be outside or in their special room where there's a lot of new sights and sounds, and the puppies are allowed to freely and safely explore new experiences. So what I'm trying to say is that no matter what the breeding environment is, the job of the person who is raising these puppies is to get them ready to adapt to new experiences, sounds, and people that they may encounter as they get older. So.
Great. Yeah, that was great.
Great. So it's a nice segue into your beliefs are really predicated on science, right? So you were trained and you are a certified behavior consultant, and you know the science behind what your beliefs are, right? And a lot of what we learn comes from, and Dr. Dodman had mentioned, Scott and Fuller, 20 plus years of data on canines, and a lot of what we know about development in mammals does come from the human literature and other studying other mammals as well. But specifically to the question, there are a number of studies. There was a study from, and we can post these either online or I can put it in the chat box. I don't know how you want me to handle that. Or I could send it to you, Allie. Gazzano et al. In 2008, and I should sit back up for a second. So Scott and Fuller was in the 50s, early 60s, and then they republished this book, and it's an excellent book. And it is a thick read, but it's really informative. And then there's some work done, some papers by Patrick Bateson in 1979, how sensitive periods arise and what they're for. That's an animal behavior. There was a specific study done by Gazzano et al. And they were looking at early experiences and the effects of behavior on adult dogs. And so this is where we know that handling is very important in our dogs. We know that 3 to 12 weeks of age is the sensitive period, as Dr. Dodman talked about earlier, and that an animal can best benefit from exposure to certain stimuli. So what would that what stimuli is? It could be the X factor. It could be another species, a cat, a dog, a horse, a human, right? Sounds, textures. And so this one specific study that Gazzano et al. Did in 2008, and it's in Applied Animal Behavior Science. It's published in Applied Animal Behavior Science. They were looking at, again, the effects of handling the animals, handling the young dogs. And they had 43 dogs, 23 were in a kennel at a breeder's, and the other half were at an owner's home, their owner's home. And half of each group were stimulated, were touched, their ears were touched, their toes were touched, they were handled. And they found that at 8 weeks of age, the dogs were then tested and they were isolated. It was an isolation test, and they wanted to monitor, they were recording vocalization and exploratory activity. And they found that those dogs that were handled early did in fact cry less and explored more, and the others did the opposite. So that's a really good study to evidence that handling and exposure to the environment, that the surroundings that the young dog is going to be living in is important. And this is also why we abhor the puppy mills, right? So those breeders who are isolating their young dogs and puppies, it's really inhumane.
Yeah, it's not a good environment for anyone.
Going back to the question, I totally agree with Donna that anyone, an expert or a backyard breeder, can do any of these techniques if they know to do them. And you could have a very well-educated backyard breeder who's doing everything right, and you could have a sort of more knowledgeable person who maybe has read the wrong stuff and is doing it the wrong way around. So it sort of depends on, it's not so much backyard versus professional. And I totally agree with Vivian also. I think I'm going to move on because they've got a lot of questions to go through, but for me, raising puppies is about three things: socialization, socialization, and socialization. And, but in socialization, I would include in that, it's not the right term. So Vivian mentioned my word is acclimation. So acclimation is getting used to things that aren't living. Socialization is, being socialized with a living creature, a person or another dog. And there are big problems if that doesn't happen. So socialization is very important. Acclimation to sounds, maybe even the sound of thunder or gunshots or something in a very low level early in life, could cause them to acclimate or desensitize or just get used to the fact that it's part of life. And then the other thing that Vivian said is in scientific literature is called gentling. And there's been lots of studies on gentling. My former resident, Dr. Mara, did her master's, actually a doctoral thesis on gentling of rodents, rats. And if they're handled when they're growing up, they turn out to be super tame and super nice. It's also been done in horses by R.D. Miller. Dr. Miller is a veterinarian. It's also been done in pigs by my friend and co-author Temple Grandin. And she found if you touch them, pet them, look after them, and give them playthings, that not only do they turn out to be, sort of more well-balanced, but actually, I'm afraid she looked in their brains, which means they had to be put down, and she found that they had increased dendritic branching. So the neurons, the nerve cells, have these filaments coming out, and it was increased dendritic branching, which means more connections, which means, in a way, kind of more brain power, more ability. So gentling, acclimation, and socialization in this sensitive period, perfect.
Well done. That was a long answer, but a very thorough one, because I think that was a loaded question. So well done, Georgette, for asking that one. Our next one is for Dr. Dodman. It's from Melinda. Any tips on raising a feral puppy? Hers was rescued at 6 months, and at almost 2 years later, she's learned a lot, but still cannot be touched. And I'm sure that would involve a very long answer. So if you might give some brief tips, and maybe we can follow up with Melinda afterward.
Okay, I'll make it real fast. There was a study in kittens in the UK, and kittens, the sensitive period is 2 to 7 weeks. And if kittens were raised in the 2 to 7 week period with 0 contact from human beings, they were never entirely accepting of human beings. And okay, they could perhaps form a sort of loose attachment to one person. They might not allow that person to pet them, but they might seek them out and spend time with them, and there's some kind of affection there. But generally speaking, they're, in terms of humans, antisocial. That work was repeated by he's from Belgium, Dr. Joel de Haas, who published a paper in 1994 and showed that in dogs, lack of human contact in the first 3 to 12 weeks led them to be more fearful and very wary of humans. And after 12 weeks, no contact with humans, like being feral, living in a wood with your mum and your litter mates and all the things that live in the wood except for people, you've actually closed the door of learning. So you find people talking about socialization. I'm going to take my 2-year-old dog out to socialize it. Too late. The door's shut a long time ago. They can engage in socializing, but socialization is a whole nother matter. And that door is shut at 12 weeks. So I'm afraid that this feral is probably always going to be suspicious of people, according to the science. Could be accepted by one person, may not particularly want to be touched by that person, but can form a kind of a decent relationship. It's just that the damage has been done in terms of lack of exposure during the sensitive period.
Yeah, that's so tough. And it goes back to your original, answer to the first question about how important socialization and hands-on is for these pups.
Mm-hmm.
Donna, this next one is for you from a fellow obedience instructor. Nancy says, I often find people thinking that many inappropriate puppy behaviors are cute. It seems like the smaller they are, the cuter it is too, or the smaller the breed of the dog, right? How can I best help them understand that early and consistent training is a necessary part of raising and owning a dog, that they will enjoy living with them for years to come? So Donna, what are some of the tricks of the trade that you've learned to talk to people? Because I have a feeling it's not always the dog that needs to learn the most, right? It's the human. And it happens to all of us.
So many times we are nothing more than teachers and teaching our clients how to do things a little bit different. And there is an art to it. You just can't go, are you kidding me? What are you thinking? You will not have a lot of clients. So, one of the things, I love that I got this answer because there's a lot of things that we see owners encouraging their puppies to do, and perhaps they shouldn't. For example, sometimes owners start dogs, Great Danes, on wee-wee pads. Now, why would you teach a dog to toilet inside if ultimately you're not going to want your Great Dane to use wee-wee pads for the rest of your life? Jumping is another one. It might be cute for our little puppy, not so much for your larger dog. This is one of my favorite. Barking or jumping or barking for attention. And then we get up and say, oh, what do you want? Do you want a treat? Do you want to go out? Do you want food? We all get this as trainers. And even sometimes we find that owners actually change their routine. For example, they may start sleeping downstairs with the new puppy because he wants him to feel safer. So what do you do as a trainer? You just can't shake your head and go, what are you thinking? You can't be insensitive. You can't be judgmental or condescending, because many times our owners think they're doing the right thing and they're not seeing the larger picture. They're seeing the forest, the trees, and not the forest. So here's my go-to. I always say when a behavior is being presented and I'm like, you're not going to be able to do this forever, I often say to them, let's think about this. I'm going to ask you a question. Is this a behavior you're willing to live with or sustain for the rest of the life of your dog? And if they say yes, you might want to point out a couple of reasons why that might not be a bad idea. But if they say no, oh no, I don't want to do this forever, then that's your opportunity to open up some dialogue and then offer them some tips of how you can do it perhaps differently. I find that as a trainer, giving our clients that opportunity to have that aha moment, oh, I never thought of that, really makes it a lot easier, or my job a lot easier. So basically, as a trainer, you're saying to yourself, why teach your puppy something you can't sustain or might want to change in the future? Hey, it's confusing enough for our dogs to come living into our house. Let's set them up for the right start right from the beginning.
Actually, may I just chip in there?
Sure.
Yes.
Totally, it was a great answer, Donna. But you triggered something. It's a little bit off topic, but it's a fact that, for example, with children, if you pay them an awful lot of attention when they're young, and you're guessing this applies to puppies too, they grow up to be independent. If you separate and distance yourself, they grow up to be very needy. It's the same with puppies, is that, if you basically cater to them, and people say, oh, he's a puppy, so he has to stay downstairs in his crate at night because we've got to teach him. I call it the Joan Rivers approach, grow up fast. If you were to let that puppy, go up a ramp and sleep on the bed, and they can have anything they want to, eventually they'll become very independent, friendly and independent, because who wants super needy, which can lead to separation anxiety and stuff like that. So I think you need to cater to the youngsters and listen to their cries when they're young, like you do with babies. But there comes a time when they're no longer babies, and then you have to not put the hammer down, but sort of gradually wean them, as you were saying, off that behavior. Sorry about that. That was an add-on.
No, I think it was a nice compliment, build that confidence at a young age so that when they're mature enough, they're confident to handle the world. And you're right. It's how frequently we compare dogs to humans, and then there's the battle of, well, they're totally different, but behavior is behavior and learning is learning. And there are a lot of similarities between us and our best friends. So well done. All right,
well, we're all mammals on this planet together.
Right. The next one is for Vivian. So Rich asks that he has a 12-year-old rescue female who doesn't seem to like the new pup. There's some growling instances and even a more physical incident, no injuries. What are some steps to ensure safety in the house other than never letting her interact with the puppy, which is obviously you don't want that in your home. You want them to get along. So Viv, do you have any tips for that?
Yeah. So the 12-year-old, Rich, I don't know if you're there, but
Rich is on with us. If Rich, you want to jump into, and again, I just want to be respectful to the other questions we have as well.
Yep. Just have a couple minutes, right, to talk. So just wanted to find out, Rich, your 12-year-old, you've had her for 12 years, or she's a rescue. I don't know how long you've had the dog, but you're not there. I guess I'll just talk. Rich, are you there? Yeah. So your 12-year-old, how long have you lived with her?
About 4 or 5 years. She's a rescue.
Okay. And then when did you get your puppy?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. Okay. How old is your puppy?
12 weeks.
Okay. So a couple things just from the brief description of your question. The growling, I would say, first of all, I'm really happy that she growls to inform puppy that she's feeling uncomfortable. I think that's really great. And then, she's actually teaching puppy some vocalization, right? That she didn't, it doesn't sound like there was a contact, the bite. It was probably an air snap or something like, move away, little puppy, you're bothering the heck out of me. Which again, I like that because that demonstrates she has bite inhibition. So that's awesome. So you're raising her right as long, she's been living with you for four years now. But, if we consider first her perspective, right? So she's been living with you for 4 years. So you got her when she was 8, no, right? Yeah. So already a senior, right? A senior, the older dog. I'm sorry, I don't know, have the name, Allie, what was the name again? Allie? No, what was the name of the dog? The older dog? The name?
Yeah, I don't have that.
Okay, all right. So the older dog's been living with you. You rescued her at an old age already. She's a senior. She's probably experiencing, you know, senior life is different than puppy life, right? I'm not diagnosing her at all, but you would expect that she would have, you know, old age syndromes and maybe some hearing, eyesight, you know, maybe she doesn't want to be bothered by puppy. So we're thinking her perspective and the function of behaviors. She's certainly saying she doesn't want to be close to puppy yet. So there are some safety measures that you can put in place, which you may have already. Baby gates are wonderful, wonderful way of including the dogs. They can still see each other, and having those up and setting the dogs up so that they're enjoying their time on each other's on their own side. Maybe give them a yummy, a chewy, or a binky of some sort, some kind of chewy or game that they can play on their side. And they can choose to be in close proximity to each other or not, but they'll be safe because puppy won't have any access to the older dog. But that's a way that we can start to desensitize the dogs, the older dog from the younger dog to the younger dog. So that's one thing that you can do that doesn't involve any effort really, right? The second thing you can do is you can work on counter conditioning, which is a technique that we use in training to teach. Is that her or is that puppy? That's puppy.
That's puppy.
Oh, really cute. So we can have the older dog, when the older dog, you'll be on the side with your older dog. When the older dog looks at the puppy from a distance through the gateway, through the baby gate, you can say, yes, pup, yes, whatever you're doing. I'm sorry, what is your older dog's name?
Miss.
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 Yes. So you can say yes, and then give her a treat. So every time she looks at the young puppy at a distance, you say yes. So that yes will help condition her, especially if you're following up with the reward, right? Something yummy. So when she learns that when she sees puppy, good things happen. Sees puppy, good things happen. You have to be pretty good with just the marking the behavior that she's looking, you know, so every time she looks. So that's another thing that you can do. Being at a distance from the puppy is going to be better because Miss is less threatened, less stressed, better able to learn, right? So that distance is important. And then the last thing you can do is just have more one-on-one time with Miss, right? You can go for a walk with her, separate one-on-one. You can groom her. And then eventually, if you have a partner or someone that can help you, maybe they can walk puppy and you can walk Miss together outdoors. So, and play outdoors, maybe. Those are a couple of suggestions I would make.
And I'm aware of time passing quickly, but I had to add something, and that is a lot of people, when they get a new puppy or a new baby, here we go again, they spend a lot of time with the new one who's kind of cute, and they're dwelling on it, and the old one gets their nose put out of joint, and then they start to growl, and it can go from bad to worse. And so there is a program that we use called Senior Support Program. And what it is, you've got to let the senior know that they still are, as it were, you know, your favorite, that this usurper is not going to put the other one's nose, not going to put his nose out of joint by this new puppy who gets all the attention and the praise and all the cute comments and picking up and petting and stuff like that. So really, you know, you can make sure that Miss gets a lot of things first, you know, first to go out the door, first to get fed, first to get a treat, first to get a toy, just to keep the pack order correct, not to flip it on its head. Otherwise, you could end up with a long-term problem, sibling rivalry.
Okay.
Yeah. And
Acknowledge that first baby.
yeah, I mean, with our animals, like us, experience emotions, right? We can never understand really what a dog feels or thinks, but we do know that we're similar in the range of emotions. So absolutely, sibling rivalry can start to develop and that sort of thing, but jealousy has been shown. Yeah.
Next.
Yeah, next, and I'm sure that we're all thinking this too, is from one of our recent studies, the causes of aggression can be medical too. So make sure that there isn't anything medical going on with your senior dog. That might be instigating some of these behaviors. It's always good to just keep that in the back of your mind too. All right, the next one is for Dr. Dodman from Veronica, asking about any research on puppies' brain development and correlations with emotions. And if you do have any research or studies that you're thinking of, Veronica, I can relay them to you. Dr. Dodman can email me a link, but is there any that come to mind?
Yeah, there's a lot of work. I mean, if you go onto the website googlescholar.com, and if you just dial up Google and type the one word in, scholar, now you're getting all kinds of scientific articles as opposed to the dross that you get on just regular old Google. And you'll find there's a lot of work from way back by a guy called Michael Fox, who used to work at Tufts, like me, in the Department of Psychology. And he did some really fantastic work in the early days about sort of brain development of puppies and stuff like that. But aware of time passing, there was something more recently. In fact, in 2020, there was somebody called Emily Bray who wrote a paper. Actually, was looking at service dogs. I think they were, I don't know whether they were guide dogs or hearing aid dog, whatever they were, but they were a combination of retrievers and stuff. And they looked at them in the 10 to 12 week age group. And they found that even by that stage of development, they had developed cooperative, communicative gestures that they're kind of really understanding basically body language from one living thing to another, that they had fairly well-developed executive function skills. Executive function is things like working memory, mental flexibility, and believe it or not, self-control. Not as well developed as an adult, but and finally, they were sensitive to human communication. Notably on that paper, there was Brian Hare, who's on our board of scientific advisors and is famous for the pointing experiment where dogs would follow a moving finger. And also Margaret Gruen, who's a colleague of mine from the American College of Veterinary Behaviorists. So there's plenty more. Some of them get very complicated about neuronal development and stuff. It's really what you're talking about is the parallel between what's happening in the brain and what's happening behaviorally and emotionally and learning-wise internally. And they do correlate, of course. If you take, I mean, Michael Fox did a lot of work with EEGs, electroencephalogram. And when a puppy's born, it's pretty much a flat line. And it doesn't really do much until they get out of the infantile period, which is the first 2 weeks. And as they're in the second, third weeks, the transitional period where eyes are opening, ears are opening, you suddenly get this increase in electrical activity. So the brain is now working properly as they do all the things we know puppies do, learning to play, learning to rough and tumble play, learning object play, and all the things. These things happen and in parallel with the development of the brain as evidenced by the electroencephalogram.
It's all very interesting. I love the physiology of it all, right? Our next question is from Jody. What are your recommendations on humans interacting with puppy play between puppies? So if puppies are wrestling, do you let them continue or do you split them up? And if you let them continue, does that teach the puppies to be rough players?
Is that for me?
Yeah, sure, Dr. Dodman.
Well, the others can join in. I just briefly say, I wouldn't interrupt it. It depends a bit. One time at Tufts, we were running a puppy training class, and there was a kind of rough and tumble trainer who just said, "Oh, throw them all together and let it all happen." And these were older puppies. Some of them were 4 or 5 months old, and one of them obviously hadn't been properly raised early on, turns out was quite aggressive, and it attacked a young puppy that was cowering under a chair, making things a lot worse, because a lot of good things can happen in the socialization period, but a lot of really bad things leading to permanent bad learning unless the puppy's protected. But if you see a couple of, 3 months old or 4 months old wrestling and playing and rolling on their back, especially if anything that follows a play bow is play, and they will nip each other and one will squeak and maybe nip back, and they're learning bite inhibition from puppy to puppy. So you don't really want to interrupt that learning because that's important. There are other species too that engage in rough and tumble play, monkeys in particular, and horrible experiments by somebody called Cheney and Seafar. And if you deprive them of everything, including rough and tumble play, they get into all kinds of weird stuff and start actually fighting with themselves, leading to something called the floating limb syndrome, which you've probably seen on YouTube, where they attack their own leg. And people laugh at it, say, how silly. What it means is they were raised without the ability to engage in rough and tumble play with their own species.
Can I add?
Yes,
Just really
please.
briefly, yes, I agree with you, and I think I would continue to have them play, and it's important for bite inhibition to if someone's being too rough, the other one would walk away or run away, right? Or if there are a lot of dogs, I personally never trained more than 4 dogs. So dyads, I would always have dogs playing with each other, no more than 4 puppies. And so after 4 or 5 months, I would start introducing, and maybe even before, toys that they can tug. So they're tugging toys instead of learning to bite, and arousal starts to go awry, and especially when they become adolescents. And so that's the way that I usually approach it, and just observing and helping the humans, the people, the dog owners know, if a dog needs help. Certainly if a dog is on their back, maybe they're feeling overwhelmed, we could always pick up the dog that was on their back, and then actually pick up the other dog, or ask the dog owner to pick up their dog and see if your dog, the one that was on their back, is following. Was it too much for them, right? So they can tell us if it's too much. That's a good way to kind of test it.
I agree with Vivian that they can tell us, and I kind of make it real simple for dog owners when they're trying to assess, is the intercanine interactions appropriate or not. And you kind of want to look for 50-50 play. Tag, you're it. Oh, and now you're it. No bullying, no stalking. Pauses in the action are really, really important. So they're running. You cool? I'm cool. Bring it on. And this is a little more difficult to quantify, but does it appear that they're both enjoying the interaction? Are they engaging back with the other, or is one kind of looking for help from the human or going under a chair? So that's kind of like a quick and dirty, easy way that you can assess if it's appropriate or not.
Yeah, well said. And it's those subtle body cues and body language that you have to pick up on, because it is their way of saying, hey, I'm cool, or I'm overwhelmed, I need help. Yeah, that was a great group answer. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. We should be able to get through some of these questions. The next one is from Amy. She asks what the best time is to start training classes for a puppy with regards to age and vaccine status. And Dr. Dodman, you touched on this a little bit at the beginning.
Well, just extrapolating from our study, the answer is for training, Vivian made the point that we only studied training, positive and negative training at different ages. And for training, it doesn't make any difference when you take the puppy for puppy training, which counters what I said earlier on, that all the thoughts of myself and the American College of Behaviorists and the American Veterinary Medical Association were get it in early because you catch the sensitive period. But it turns out that the sensitive period doesn't come to a full stop, at the end of 12 weeks. It doesn't suddenly, the bar comes down. And I know in Japan, I had a Japanese resident, she said in Japan, they believe there's a secondary period of sensitive learning. And maybe that's what we're banking on, because they seem to learn very well, because there was no difference in outcome all the things that Vivian mentioned, reduction of aggression, compulsive disorder, excessive barking, and so on. It was the same whether you trained early or late. So it really doesn't matter. But pointing out the fact that this was to do with training, and that wasn't to do necessarily with socialization, or my other word, acclimation. And it wasn't anything to do with gentling. So gentling is best done early, probably in the 2 to 4 week age for a dog. Lots of very pleasant handling and touching, as we've talked about quite a bit. And socialization means, you know, Dr. Dunbar's puppy parties are famous, but there's all kinds of ways of socializing a dog to people of all different, you know, shapes and sizes and colors, and funny walks and walker frames. I mean, you can desensitize them to as many things as you can think that they're going to come across in life, not to mention, you know, other dogs or even other species. If you've got a dog you want to live with a cat, if you raise it with a cat, it'll probably get on well with cats for the rest of its life. If you miss the window, it'll see the cat as a prey animal. So there's a lot of things to think about, and socialization is very important. 3 times: socialization, 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 acclimation, and gentling occur earlier in the sensitive period. Training, not so much. You can do that up to 6 months. And actually, we have another study in the wings about training in the 6 to 12 month age group, and we have all the data in, we just haven't analyzed it yet.
Can you remind me or reiterate what was the age at which the maternal antibodies are still within the puppy? Is it 8, 14, 16 weeks? What?
It depends.
Generally?
First of all, it depends a little bit on the number of antibodies, you know, the spectrum of antibodies and the concentration of them in the mother. Mm-hmm. But for a well-vaccinated mum, they don't suddenly stop. You know, they wouldn't say at 8 weeks they've gone. And you know, it's postulated that they can last up to 16 weeks.
Okay.
Can I add something really quick? And that is that, so training, and we are focusing on puppies here, but we're training the puppies. So it's really important that we're also recognizing that we need to learn more about dogs, right? So if you're taking into account that understanding body language, understanding, as Donna had talked about, antecedent consequences, right? What we're doing, antecedent, what we're doing, what's happening in the environment, what can we control to help improve the behavior? She had mentioned, you look at, puppy jumps on you, you look at puppy, you just reinforce the jump. Then little puppy becomes big puppy. So there are things that you are teaching. We're constantly learning. We as mammals, dogs are constantly, puppies are constantly learning. Making good associations and bad associations. And, you know, we just need to be a little bit more mindful about our actions as well. So certainly formal training, and that was the question, at what age? And we talked about it in our study, but recognizing that we as the dog owner has to also put in some time to understand our actions.
I think there's another question coming up that's very similar to the answer you just gave.
Right. There's 2 more questions I want to get to, and we have about 5 minutes, and you are happy to stay a minute longer. If there are any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, or you can email me at ally@dogstudies.org and we can get back to you. But I'm really interested to hear from each of you on this, and this is from Kate. She asks, what are the top 3 things you recommend teaching in a puppy kindergarten group class? So who wants to go first? What are the 3 things? Donna's got a whole list of things, but if you had to pick the top 3, what would be in your puppy group class? Vivian or Donna, do you guys want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
Mine would be and are prompted attention. Attention is the mother of all training, right? Attention on you. So attention is also recall, right? So teaching the humans not to poison the cue, teaching the humans not to screw up the meaning of these words, right? We're a verbal species. Our dogs aren't, right? They do come pretty hardwired to understand communicative gestures, pointing gestures, humans, pointing gestures, our eyes, what we're looking at. They learn that early on, but these words that we use, we will often screw up the meaning. Come here to mean don't come here when we end the fun, for example. So recall, understanding body language is another thing that I strongly emphasize. It's so important, the subtleties of the way that they communicate.
Third,
What's that?
you said, and third?
And third, I think to teach them how to call their, it's a recall, but it's really just teaching people to go from asking for behaviors, cueing behaviors, to luring, right? So if they're not able to call the dog out of play, for example, right, with a cue, then maybe learning to go in and lure the dog out versus, yeah. So doing it gently, using some food on their nose. And so those are 3 things that I would.
Yeah. Donna, what are your 3?
Unmute. Unmute. Can't hear.
I really tried to give you 3, but I'll do 4 really quickly.
Okay.
In the group classes that I have, these are the 4 biggest things that I present, and I feel that, in my opinion, they're kind of non-negotiable in my group setting. First, teaching owners how to better understand how canines communicate. This is important so that humans don't mislabel dog appropriate behavior. So I spend a lot of time explaining that. Second thing that's important in my class is developing canine impulse control. And I love this, owner directed deference in highly distractible environment, setting of a group class. Helping owners find ways to infuse the learned basic obedience cues as part of everyday life. And the 4th one, which is really important to me, is how owners can enrich a dog's environment through physical and mental stimulation. I couldn't give you 3, sorry.
I can give you 3. I think the ones I'm just about to say are potentially life-saving. And one of them is, as Vivian said, is recall. So if a dog is running towards a busy main road and you're able to stop him in his tracks, which I can, my dog, you can save him from getting run over. You know, there's a cat on the other side or a squirrel, he's going forward, and you just use some word and he comes back, or even a whistle. I've got a whistle for really serious things. I use a dog whistle. Another one is just supposing he's on the other side of the road and he wants to come to you. You need a wait command, which works very well for me and my dog. If you say, you have to wait, you know, with a hand signal, and he sits down and waits on the other side of the road, you just saved his life a second time. And the third one for me would be leave it, because there's all kinds of bad stuff they can get into. And it might even be another dog that you can see, you know, has spikes on his collar and it's going to be a big problem, or a person who's frightened of a dog. Leave it. And you can get them to like, okay, I got it. Okay, we're out of time. Next question.
Sure. So we have 2 more. One's from Taylor, and this goes actually to I think our study explains it a lot. Asks, what are your thoughts on the relationship between attendance in puppy socialization class and later behavior in adulthood? More specifically, do you feel particular styles like free play versus highly managed by humans impacts the outcome of social ability, fearfulness, and problem behaviors? And our paper found just that, right? Found it, that is exactly what happens. Dr. Dodman, you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you need a mixture of the 2, you know, so you can't have total disorganization. If you just tip all the puppies into a room and they run around, you know, that's kind of how serious puppy training starts. They will have this free play interaction period, but there needs to be some organization to it as well. You wouldn't want them to be too regimented with no free time, no play. You wouldn't want to play all the time with no organized and structured classes or lessons, so to speak.
Yeah, well said. There's one more question in the chat if everybody has an extra minute. It's from Margaret. A suggestion, what to say to people who have veterinarians that are still recommending against socializing puppies till they've had all their shots. And Margaret, feel free to jump in, but it is tricky to, I can understand the trickiness of going against the veterinarian's recommendation and, saying that this is what I think is better for their development. I guess as a veterinarian, Dr. Dodman, what would you tell a colleague who may think differently?
The vets not believing in socialization. Is that the story?
That seems
I guess
what the question might be. Yeah.
I guess I'd get another vet.
Oh,
There you go.
there's that. Get another opinion. I guess sometimes in your own, you have to be an advocate for yourself and educate yourself. And it sounds like Margaret's definitely educated with the studies that she's read, and you have to do what you think is best. And if it's hard, yes, we do want them to get another vet, she says in the chat. That's right.
Just don't tell them. Just do it anyway.
Yeah, but it's also, it's also a learning opportunity, an opportunity to possibly share your findings, what you're finding with this vet, maybe send them some data or some articles from Dr. Dodman and other scientists on socialization is fine.
Tell her to give them a copy of steps.
Yes, that's a good idea. Give them a gift. I think it's a great opportunity to teach another human being, because, they took the oath to do no harm, right? So.
Well, funnily enough, the oath starts out with, I promise I'll do my best for society.
Which is to do no harm.
Not necessarily. It means, for example, you're going to help chicken farmers, beef farmers, pig farmers. You're feeding the community. So
maybe it needs to be looked at. Maybe it needs to be looked at. And maybe I shouldn't tattoo that on me yet.
It does need to be looked at. And actually, that's not the motto of the Humane Society Veterinary Medical Association, which puts animals first.
Yeah. Well, there's so many vets now that are using the human-centric approach model of, that are used in hospitals with humans, right? So to care for pets like they would a human as an individual. So you're just with the wrong veterinarian. But again, I still believe in the opportunity to just help this person along.
Yeah, Margaret just commented, and she's right on the ball. She just gives them articles. I had a friend like that at the Tufts University, and he never argued with me, never said anything. He just sent me an article on a subject.
Did you read them?
Of course.
Okay.
I feel like it could be one of those things where if they hear it, if you hear it from your parent telling you, oh, don't do this or do that, you kind of goes in one ear and out the other. But if you hear it from multiple sources and you read that there's actually science behind it, you've done what you can, right? You can only bring the horse to water. You can't force it to drink. So, keep fighting the good fight, Margaret. And
bury him in papers.
Any other questions?
No, I think, I want to be respectful of our time too. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to email us, but we did a really good job of getting to most. There's only a couple questions we didn't get to, but we'll follow up with those folks later on. I don't think that they're on with us right now. So I want to give a round of applause and a thank you to our team of experts. Thank you so much, Vivian Zatola, Donna Gleason, and Dr. Nicholas Dodman. We are grateful for the work that you do and the contributions you make to the Animal Welfare Society. So thank you, thank you.
Everyone's
and thank
muted.
You to those.
Everyone's muted, but we'll assume there's a thunderous round of applause in the background.
No,
they're coming.
Assume something.
Yeah. They're coming through on the chat. Lots of thank yous in the chat. So thank you for those.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah. I'm going to follow up with everyone and send an email that's going to include a link, some of the links that we talked about, how to get one of these awesome t-shirts, a copy of Dr. Dodman's books. And if you'd like to continue supporting our research, I'll include a donation link there too. So, and with that, we are wrapped up. So again, go enjoy your Monday afternoon and thank you once more.
All right. Peace.
Bye.
Bye guys.
Bye.